Okay.
I don't know, Andy, can you give me sharing permissions? I can't share my screen at the moment.
Let's have a go at giving you sharing permissions. Let's have a look. Have a go now, Sian, see if you can share.
Yeah, there we go.
Works? Okay, good.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, let's kick off then. So welcome everybody along to this edition of the B2B Marketing Shizzle. For those that have great powers of observation, you'll recognize that I'm not actually Ed Davidson. My name is Andy Bargery, for those that haven't come across me before. And I'm standing in for Ed today because he is on the side of a mountain somewhere, enjoying himself on a snowboard or a set of skis or something along those lines. So even though Ed's not here, the usual rules apply. We've got half an hour to have a look at a topic related to B2B marketing. And we've got our guest speaker, who for this session is the rather wonderful Sian Heaphy, who is a director of Agile Marketing Consultancy Bright. And Sian is going to talk to us for about 15-20 minutes on the topic of design thinking, or the power of design thinking to drive marketing creativity and customer centricity. So on that note, I'm going to shut up, hand you over to Sian, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end.
Perfect.
So Sian, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. And can everyone see my screen? Is that showing the right
slides
and everything? Perfect. And apologies, you can probably already hear I am full of cold, so I don't think I'm going to go into a coughing fit, but I will go through this quite quickly so we can move into discussions, and I want to hear your thoughts as well on design thinking. But before I crack on with that, I guess a little bit about me. So as Andy mentioned, I'm a director at Bright, and we are an agile marketing and marketing transformation consultancy. So I've been in B2B marketing for just over 12 years now, and it's for 6 of those I've been an agile marketing specialist. So working primarily agency side, working with clients to deliver campaigns and projects and activity using agile ways of working. And then over the last few years, we've moved more into actually working with clients to help them adopt those agile ways of working, transform how they work together as a team, how they go to market, and use agile ways of working and tools like design thinking, which I will talk about today. And I think one of the main reasons why we moved into that space and why we're such advocates of design thinking and agile alongside that is, and I'm sure none of this will be new to anyone who is sat here in this room, but as marketers, we are bombarded daily. We have got so many different priorities, competing priorities, lots of different inputs and lots of different activity that we are doing, and that only sort of increases in its complexity as you head towards the medium and the enterprise space. And what we found was that this, I guess, inundation of data, different inputs, different priorities, and sometimes a lack of alignment in terms of what those priorities are that came from the business, just meant that as marketing teams, they kind of went into a rinse and repeat mode, and they didn't necessarily innovate. They kept on doing the same things, maybe tweaking things here and there. But there wasn't really any creativity or thinking about the customer and what it is that the customer is looking for as part of this. And that's really where we started to talk a lot more with our clients and use a lot more with our clients design thinking tools as a way to help them to step out of their comfort zone, step out of their usual environment and give them an opportunity and space to have that creativity and to generate those ideas that every marketer has. It's just the environment, the systems, the processes, and the way that they were set up just meant that they weren't able to do that. So for anyone who doesn't know what design thinking is, here is a brief overview of what the stereotypical design thinking process is. It is slightly different in some use cases within marketing, mainly the prototype piece, because we're not always building a product or a proposition. So you might be tweaking that ever so slightly for whatever it is that you are executing against. But typically, It follows the format of, understanding and observing your audiences, starting to define those critical problems, those critical challenges, and ideating on solutions, and then building on those ideas and those solutions and testing them in market. And agile ways of working is certainly a great way that you can do that. So why do we like design thinking so much? And I've mentioned it briefly, but I think one of the things that I really like about design thinking is it fosters curiosity. And we are innately curious people, but I think the older that we get, and the systems that we are put into, particularly within our work places, doesn't really foster that curiosity and that ability to sort of deep dive into why things work like that, or why do people do things in that way, and use those insights to then inform their activity moving forward. And design thinking is a really great way to sort of put some frameworks and some systems in place that can help your teams and your clients be more curious. The other thing is it removes the confirmation bias. So, and I say confirmation bias because in marketing, it's really important that you do utilize your experience and your knowledge. But I think what we can get into the habit of doing is just trusting our gut, trusting our assumptions, rather than diving into the data, challenging and probing what we're seeing and what we're hearing to see if that's really what it is. I can't remember, I think it's Saatchi who said something like, 9 times out of 10, what someone says isn't actually what they think or feel or do. So really, this is really thinking about how we sort of step out of that superficial level and deep dive into more of the data and insights to help support that activity and find those alternatives, find different ways of doing things that might actually work better for your business and your clients. The other one is it really does foster curiosity, take people out of their comfort zones, put them in different spaces. So a lot of the time when I'm running design thinking workshops, we try to take them out of their environment completely. So there's nothing that they are necessarily familiar with that really sort of gives them that opportunity to kind of open into a new space. And from that, actually, what we've seen from design thinking as well is that it's actually provided a lot, like teams perform better together. They collaborate more effectively. They understand each other better. And I'll talk about that one in a second in a little bit more detail. And they just function better as a team. And a lot of the time, certainly over the last 3 years, a lot of my work from a transformation perspective really has been about how do you get your teams working better together, whether that's within functions or whether that's cross functions. If you've got shared services or if you're working with suppliers and third parties, it's really sort of how do you bring people together and working effectively towards a common goal. And part of that reason is because design thinking, as I say, goes beyond that superficial layer and really helps you to understand not just your colleagues, but also your customers. And we'll talk a bit more about some of the tools and some of the different frameworks that I like to use for that. But it's a very human-centered approach. And there's lots of success stories and use cases out there. Apple versus BlackBerry is a classic one from the early noughties in terms of BlackBerry, whilst growing massively in the noughties, didn't see what Apple saw in terms of how people wanted to utilize technology, how they wanted to be able to they didn't want to have 20 different plugs for their music player, their phone, their portable Walkman, whatever it is that we're talking about. So there's really lots of great use cases in terms of how design thinking has helped businesses accelerate, and Apple's a great case study of that, as well as like BlackBerry in the reverse that sort of didn't do that and has seen a significant decline as it headed into 2010 onwards. So there's obviously the customer centricity side in terms of how it really helps you understand what your customers are thinking, feeling, doing. but then it also does the same thing for your colleagues. And particularly since the pandemic, as we all work remotely, it's a lot harder these days to get to know your colleagues well, to empathize with them when you're talking through a screen. So we found that design thinking has also really helped in that sense as well. So final couple of slides, and then I want to open up to any questions and discussions. But a few ways to think about how you can use design thinking, whether that's within your business, whether that's with your clients. And I'll talk through a few of my favorites. But I think design thinking is great because there are so many tools out there, and I can share some resources afterwards with Ed to share with you all. But there are so many different tools and frameworks that can be repurposed, that can be utilized as, that means that you can really use design thinking across the marketing process, whether that's at the very beginning in terms of your market research, customer intelligence, really getting to grips with the market that you're going into, through to your strategy and planning, particularly on the prioritization piece, and how you align all of your teams on the key goals and outcomes and priorities that you're going to be working towards. And then ultimately how you go about executing your campaigns, how you go about building your value propositions, and how you reflect on that activity and use those reflections to inform your marketing moving forward. So I'd love to spend time talking about all of the different models that we have, or even some of them that are on here. But I'm going to talk about 3 that I have found personally work really well with my customers. And the first one is the lightning decision jam. So some of you may have heard this, some of you may not have, but it's a really great exercise, small and large group of people, to really bring people together on like where you are as a business, what are the challenges that you're experiencing, and how you want to move forward. So it's I love this one because it kind of does a few things all in one. It helps to define some of the problems and some of the challenges, and really bring people together and bring that clarity to what those problems and challenges are. It lets you go and ideate on those solutions and really start to think about how you move forward. And then you can extend it as well into the prioritization and really building out a roadmap and an action plan. So if you're ever working with a client and you're very much in that sort of beginning phases, building the strategy, etc., this can be a really good starting point to get some clarity up front and alignment across lots of different stakeholders as to what it is that you need to do moving forward. The second one that I really like is called the sailboat retrospective. So retros are a big part of Agile. I won't dive too much into that now, but I really like the sailboat retro because I think it also can be adapted in 2 different ways. So it's a great way to reflect on your marketing activity in terms of what worked well, what hasn't, what are the things that are holding you back, where would you like to move forward, and how are you going to go about doing that. But you can also use that from a planning perspective as well. If you haven't got quite as much time to do a lightning decision jam, you'll see that they both have the sailboat piece as part of that activity. So sometimes actually just doing the sailboat retrospective and thinking about where you want to use it, whether it's at the beginning of your activity or as a checkpoint during your activity or at the end, can be really useful for that reflection and getting insights and learnings and feeding that through into your activity moving forward. And then the final one is empathy mapping, because I can't talk about design thinking and not talk about customer understanding. And as I said, when we talk about the customer understanding, it's really about how you support your clients to dive below what some of the data is that they're saying. So a lot of the times, and I see this with quite a few of my clients, particularly in the media, they've got lots of data points and they'll have done lots of interviews, and they'll rely on the interview data because it's come from the horse's mouth, for want of a better word. Whereas actually, and they're doing that in part because also there's a data challenge that all of us marketers have in terms of the amount of data, how we read it, how we generate insights from it. But actually, the over-reliance on qualitative data takes away from the quantitative data, which is actually really important in this instance, because what that is showing you is what they're doing, not what they're saying, but what they're doing. And that is much more powerful in these instances. So when we do things like empathy mapping, we're not just thinking about like customer interviews, we're also looking at how can we walk a day in their shoes? How can we spend some time observing how they're interacting with our software or interacting with our products and services? How can we really get to the heart of, what are they thinking? How's their customer experience? What are they feeling? What are they doing? All of those things that really help to build out that empathy and give us that detailed level of understanding of our customers that we need as marketers to create great marketing and create value both for businesses, clients, as well as their end users. So I've whizzed through that. I did say to Andy I wanted 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I think one of the things that I want to think about here is that design thinking, it's not necessarily, there's definitely cultural components to it, but what I would say is it's a way, it's a mechanism to help you be more curious or to help your clients be more curious. And there are lots of tools out there that can help you do that and help facilitate those kind of workshops. And I think as part of that, it means that you've got to really think about with your clients and with your teams, how you make time for that and how you make time for them to be curious and to be creative and to ideate together and prioritize in terms of how they're going to move forward. And that also means, the other side of that is thinking about how you use your data, how you use your audience insights and other sources out there to inspire you and to really help to get you to start thinking differently. And then the final piece is, and I say this to all of my clients, start small. There are so many different frameworks out there, and I'm always incredibly impressed by clients that sort of go full hog straight into it and adopt lots and lots of frameworks and lots of different tools. But it can be a lot for teams if they've never worked in this way before, if they've never used these tools. It can be a lot for them to sort of understand, take on board. So what I tend to recommend is start small, think about existing processes where injecting a bit of design thinking could actually be useful, and then start to build from there. And that is it. So I'm going to open up to questions or just actually general conversation, because I love to hear about how you guys are using design thinking. What are the benefits that you're seeing? What are the challenges that you're having with your clients and customers?
Fantastic, Sian. Thank you. That was a very rapid look at design thinking, wasn't it? And as a marketeer, I really like it because it feels like what you're saying is let's just get closer to our customers and use that depth of understanding to create and ideate and test and refine stuff as we bring it into market. Yeah. So I really like the idea of design thinking. But a couple of questions before we open it up, if I may. I think the first one is, can you give us some examples, B2B examples of challenges you've overcome by taking the design thinking approach?
Yeah, so I think the first one would probably be value propositions. There's a great framework by a company called Strategizer. And I think when it comes and that's a classic one for me, because particularly when I think about like SaaS businesses or, product oriented businesses, they're very techie guys, they're very passionate about their products, and so they're very much focused on their features and the things that they think it does well, rather than what they're interested in or the value that their customers get from those products and those services. Design thinking can be, again, a really great way, particularly with technical audiences, to help them flip the perspective and move away from thinking about their products and their features to, why do your customers like your product? What does it do that makes their lives easier or better or whatever it might be?
Why should they care?
Exactly.
beyond the features of the product itself. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess my second question then is, what are the kind of common challenges you see in trying to get your clients to adopt a design thinking approach? What are the kind of objections you have to overcome to move in this direction?
So it's an interesting one. So what I would say is, in my experience, the objections typically tend to come from the people that you want to get involved in design thinking workshops. So not the leadership teams, and generally speaking, not necessarily, like your marketing directors or heads of it, typically the middle managers or the people that are like on the ground, because they're just super busy. And so for them, it's sometimes hard for them to see or understand the value of trying this way of working or trying these tools or trying these frameworks, because they just want to get stuff done.
Yeah.
They're in the middle of 10 different things. So it's actually more, I found, that side of things versus necessarily like your leadership team, because your leadership team are always looking to have better marketing. They're always looking for more creativity, more innovation. So it's really more about the how you sort of inject that lower down for the people that have actually got to deliver it.
So those at the coal face who have to change their ways of operating are those you have to convince. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sian. Any other questions from around the room for Sian? Oh, you've blown them all away, Sian. I did have another question actually, and I suppose it's more of an observation, and it's to do with the empathy mapping framework that you presented. I really like the look of that, and I think it seems like a good way of really deep diving into, your customers and getting to know their needs and wants at a very deep level. Have you? And what kind of examples, or again, what sort of products and services have you used that for to get close to customers, or does it work universally?
It can kind of work universally. So I've used something similar. So again, going back to the value proposition piece with Strategizer, one of the things that they focus in on the customer side is what they call pains, gains, and then the jobs to be done. So that is, what do they have to do in the day? What are the pain points they're experiencing? What are the things that they want to achieve? But the empathy map almost takes that a level, like it's sort of made more to the emotional side of things. So the pains and gains piece is still really important, but it also goes to how are they feeling in that moment? How are they doing things? Like what's the blocker? So I've used it with propositions. I've used it as part of buyer journey mapping to really kind of think about what the experience is for our target user, if they're on our website or if they're engaging with our sales team, whatever it might be. So if you have got, basically it's universal, because if you're ever doing something where you've got an end user, you could probably use an empathy map to better understand them, whatever the use case is.
Yeah, okay. And I guess you could apply it to whoever's in the DMU, couldn't you? It doesn't have to be the end user. It could be anyone involved. Yeah. Okay.
Could be any stakeholder. You could even use it for colleagues. There's another, my colleague, she does a lot on the change communication side, and they could do empathy mapping for employees as well. So it doesn't have to be external only, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Any questions, anybody? Otherwise, I can keep going. I could quiz Sian all afternoon, but we've only got about 4 minutes until the cut-off. So I don't want anyone to miss out if you've got a question brewing. Now is the time. Okay, silent still. Another question for you then, Sian, from me is there a wrong time to think about design thinking? When would it not work?
Well, that's a really good question. So I don't know. So I don't know if I can say that there's a wrong time to use like some of the tools and some of the frameworks, although of course, like you have to read the room, and if you're not getting the traction that you're looking for, then it could actually, certainly from a sort of, if you're thinking about it from a change perspective, it could actually be more of a detriment to continue versus to sort of stop and take stock. But I think one of the things, like with all sorts, like with a few of the things that I've talked about, design thinking does require insights, it requires data, and I think it can also, because of that, mean it's very easy to go down the wrong rabbit hole. So a lot of the time it's also thinking about what is really important when you're thinking about design thinking is making sure that you've got someone, whether that's a facilitator or whether it's someone else in the room, that can still sort of take a step back and see the bigger picture, so that there's always someone that can kind of challenge the assumptions or just bring people back into the room. Because as I say, once you start going down something, it can be very hard to bring people back. So that would probably be the one thing that I would say. You've got to have someone that can sort of lead it, guide it, and facilitate that conversation as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess just looking at the clock, we've got a few minutes left. You mentioned in your slides that the ICE framework, and then
yes,
yeah, have you got time to sum that up?
Oh, I do. Yeah, ICE is
okay.
a great ICE is a great one. So the ICE framework it's a way to prioritize your activity. So we use it a lot when it comes to, if you're designing lots of experiments, whether that's, A/B testing, multivariate testing, or something else. That's a great use case for using the ICE framework, but you could also use it just in terms of prioritizing your activity. And what it basically does is it asks you to rank your activity across 3 criteria. So the first one is, what impact do you think it's going to have on your business goals? The second one is, how confident do you think, how confident are you that impact is going to happen? And then the third one is ease of implementation. So basically it's like, do you think it's going to achieve your goals? How confident are you that it's going to do it? And how easy is it for you to go and do that? And you can sort of rank on a scale of like 1 to 5 and use a scoring mechanism to essentially help you prioritize where you should invest your time and effort. So you guys, like as a team, you have to decide what your thresholds are and what 1 to 5 means for you in your context and as a business. But it's a really great one if you've got tons of ideas and you need to sort of whittle them down. The ICE framework can be a very neutral way to do it as well, because it strips out all of the emotion and you're just focusing on like numbers to sort of bring that together.
That's great. It reminds me of the SFA analysis: suitability, feasibility, acceptability. Same sort of thing, isn't it? But really useful, as you say, to strip out the emotion and just get down to some solid numbers. That's
exactly.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Sian. We've got
worries.
less than a minute, so if you bring up a question, now is the final chance to pose that question. Otherwise, I think just to keep Ed happy, I'll bring it to a close as my clock has just ticked over the past mark. So on that note, Sian, thanks very much again for coming along.
Pleasure.
I've certainly enjoyed it and learned some stuff. I hope everybody else has as well. And your normal service will resume in 2 weeks' time with Ed taking the helm. So thanks everyone for coming along.
Thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.